Okay, welcome everybody. I'm here to talk about money. If you're not here to listen to me, you can stay here. Don't worry, just carry on sitting. This is the last of my 5 talk series, trying to empower students with information that can help them in life, in decision making, in various areas of life. And today we're looking at money. Most of my initial part of my talk is from a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know if any of you have read it, but I would strongly recommend you get it and you read it. It'll change the way you look at money, but I'm going to take a lot from it. I'm actually surprised how many people think that any form of saving is dangerous, that you might lose your money, that the stock market might collapse. Saving is a good thing. There's such a thing as compound interest. When you put your money at the bank, you get interest on that money, and then you get interest on that interest as it grows. Look, just a straight a bank account these days won't give you much interest, it won't give you much return, but there are more lucrative ways. There are 32-day call deposits and things like that. In the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he talks about the fact that when the American, the whites that they went to America landed at New York, they bought Manhattan Island, the land of Manhattan Island, for a few hides and, I don't know, beads and whatever, for about $17. If they had have taken that $17 and put it on a call-bearing account at a bank, and they drew that money out today, they would have enough money to buy the entire Manhattan Island back with all the buildings on it. That shows you the power of compound interest. But putting your money, it's not the greatest, because we live in what's the interest rates? The inflation rate. The inflation rate is sitting at about 6, 7, 8%, and if you take your money to the bank, you're getting, I don't know, 3, 4, 5%. So you're making less than inflation, so your money is actually getting worth less. There are other ways of making money, and what the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad says is he says, if you want to make money, why don't you buy a money-making machine? Makes sense. Well, what is a money-making machine? What does it look like? Is there such an animal? I'm not talking about a machine that prints money, but I'm talking about some way of making money. Now, I think probably the easiest, you've all seen those vending machines outside. Somebody has invested, they've taken money, their own money, and they've bought those vending machines, and they've put them there, and those vending machines are making money for them. They're not doing anything. The man who's making the money is not working. He's doing nothing. And yet each month, that machine will be generating income for him. You see how you can use money. Instead of spending all your money, you take some of it and you invest it in a money-making machine. What I'd like to talk about more this morning is about property. I lecture in architecture, so I know a bit more about property, and I want you guys to think about that. If you buy a flat and you rent that flat out, you will get, I don't know, it depends on the size of the flat and the income, you will get about an 8% return. When you say, well, okay, but the inflation rate's 8%, you're not making any money. But you're getting capital growth on the property as well. And the capital growth of the property is usually in line with inflation. So you're getting an 8% return above inflation. Now, there's a very little simple rule that I want to teach you as to work out how much money you make if you buy a flat and rent it out. You guys might say, well, I'm poor, I can't afford that. You know, live at home with your folks for a few years when you start business, when you finish at varsity. Buy a flat, put a tenant in, wait 2 or 3 years, and then you'll be able to buy another flat and you can move into that one and you've got an asset. Let me show you how it works. Say you buy a flat for 300,000 Rand. That's your investment capital. You want to know what your return is. Your return is your rent, what you get in, minus all your expenses, usually your living. So it's your rent. So your rent, I don't know, say it's 3,000 Rand a month, minus levies, say 500, that comes to 2,500, and you times that by 12. If you do that little calculation, you'll get a figure, and you probably find it's somewhere around 8% at the moment. When I bought the mini factory that I bought, I was getting a 12% return. And because the economy was so good at that stage, I thought that was maybe a nominal return. Nowadays, if you get a 12% return, it's phenomenal. I found that the smaller the properties, the better the return. So you buy a bachelor flat, and it's great because you only got a little bit of money, or the bank will only allow you to buy a small flat initially. If you buy a big house, your returns are a lot less. If you buy a very big house, like a 3-bedroom house in Kloof, you probably find that you rent it out, you might only get a 4% return. There was the story of this Jewish guy named Schlanger, I don't know if it's true or not. He used to rent out his own house, the house that he lived in. He rented it for 25,000 Rand a month. This was a few years ago, so that was a lot of money. And people said to him, "You're nuts. Why are you renting a big house for 25,000 Rand when you could buy a house for 25,000 Rand a month?" He said, "Well, the factor of the matter is, with the money that I could have bought the house, I bought mini factories. And those mini factories give me a 50,000 Rand a month rental. I take half of that, I pay off the rent of my house, and I've got 25,000 Rand a month to live on." So look at use that little calculation that I gave you there to work out returns before you buy a flat for rental. It's very simple. It's what you get per year divided by what you pay per year. That's your percentage income. What the guy in Rich Dad Poor Dad says is that your house is not an investment. Your car is not an investment. An investment is something which is an income generating thing which creates money for you. Now, I want to talk a little bit about debt. I think we all know that debt's a bad thing. I'm up to my ears in debt. I had a dream to build my own dream house, and I started building it, and in 2008 the economy collapsed, and I still owe the bank about 100,000 Rand. That's bad debt. Buying things for yourself, especially on a credit card, for future earnings is a bad thing. You'll find you'll slip into it very easily, and it takes you years to get out. But there is such a thing as good debt. So what's the difference between good debt and bad debt? You need to learn this. Bad debt is when you buy stuff for yourself. You buy yourself a new... Well, look, your house and your car, you've got to go into bonds and HP for those sort of things. So accept that. I mean, that's fine. But don't rack up 20 grand worth of debt to go on an overseas holiday and just have that debt sitting there. Or a new pair of shoes for the ladies, or whatever, you know. Good debt is when you use the bank's money to make money. So you take the bank's money at whatever their interest rate is, maybe 10%, and you buy a flat with their money, and that flat is income generating. So you're not living in that flat, that's a money-making machine. So you take the 300 grand from the bank, you buy a flat, and you start paying that flat back. Let me tell you my experience with the property market, where I made my money. I've lost it all again now. I've got 2 girls in private schools, and I've got a wife who's Russian, so I've had expensive overseas holidays. But when I was making money, this is what we did. My partner and I didn't have any money to use. I found a partner who had some cash. That's also a useful thing to do. We saw a property that I knew was a residential property that could have zoning for business. So we bought it as a deceased estate. I think we paid, I don't know, 300,000 or something. And when the transfer came through, I sold it 3 days later to somebody who wanted to use that house as a business, because it was on Windermere Road. And the net profit we made after paying estate agent fees and transfer duties and all that, we made 70 grand just on that buying and selling. So my mate and I took this money as a deposit, and we bought a mini factory. We bought the mini factory for 270,000 Rand. Now what we did, now accountants will tell you that this is not the best idea. But I'm telling you, if you want to sleep easy at night, it's a good idea. We borrowed my friend's wife's money. We loaned the money from my friend's wife. She had some money which she had inherited. And If that had been from the bank, the bond repayment would have been about $4,000 a month. So what my partner and I decided to do was we each put in $2,000. So we were covering the bond repayment. The rental, when it came in, was about $3,500, so it wasn't quite covering, but that went in as well. What's nice about that system is if your tenant ever defaults, ever runs away, or you don't have a tenant, you've still got the money to cover your bond and you can sleep easy at night. You see where I'm going? There are other ways of doing it. Just Letting has a system where they will guarantee your rental. Because the problem, many factories are good because the tenant is pretty secure, it's a business and they've got money. You buy a small little flat, and I've seen it happen to friends of mine. They put somebody in, the guy pays for 3 months, he stops paying. He starts living there, and how do you get that guy out? You know, what my mate eventually did was he hired a couple of Nigerians to go live in the flat with this person. And that got them out. She was a white Afrikaans lady. But it's hard. So you need to find ways of getting your money and getting it securely. And I think the easy way of doing it is being able to put money in yourself and cover that. We paid off that mini factory in 3 years, just over 3 years. And we bought and sold it just at the right time. We bought it in 2003, and I think we sold it in about 2007. That was when the boom time was. We bought for $270, we sold for $800,000, and it was paid off. That was the best money I've ever made. I should never have sold it, okay? But we sold it because my partner was moving overseas, and I wanted to build my dream house. But look at that amount of money we made. If we had kept that thing, paid off, that mini factory would be kicking out $4,000 a month until the end of time. It's paid off, it's sitting there, and it's giving you money. It's a little money-making machine that will give you money each month. And what you do is, at the moment you've bought one mini factory, and it's paid off, you buy another one. And now you're getting 2 mini factories paying for one. You can see how that works exponentially. Once you've paid off 2, you buy a third one, now you've got 3 paying for one, and you see how quickly you can generate money that way. That's how the wealthy people in this world make money. I want to shift the focus a little bit now, just to warn you that money can grab you. Money has a way of getting its claws into people, and I'm not going to say the Bible says this and the Bible says that, but there is a spiritual law when it comes to money. And Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is not a Christian book, he mentions it. If you've ever watched Oprah Winfrey, she uses a lady called Susie Ortman, I think her name is. Orman, Susie Orman. She says exactly the same thing. And what they say is that to be free of the claws of money, you've got to be a generous person. You've got to give some money away. Susie, I saw a program where she was dealing with these teenagers who had maxed their credit cards and they were in huge debt. Now they've got so much debt, and Susie's saying to them, give money away. Rich Dad Poor Dad, he says his real dad was a professor, and he says his real dad was a poor dad, and his friend's dad, which he calls his fake dad, was a very wealthy man. And he said his wealthy dad was always giving money away. If he saw a beggar came past, gave him money. And that's thing about giving. It releases people from the grips of money. So get into the habit of being a generous person. I heard a story at church on Sunday, and funny enough, we're doing a similar thing. One of my friends, I didn't know this, he started a business, and in 2 years his business was in dire straits. He was really struggling, and he was praying about it, and God said to you, you're very tight-fisted. You need to be generous. And he started being generous, and his business turned around overnight. I've got a lot of stories to tell. But how much should we give? The Bible talks about a tithe. That's 10% of your income. That's quite a lot of money. Do you give that before tax, after tax? I think, in my experience, you must ask God. If you're in a relationship with God, ask Him. Ask Him what you think you should give. I always believe you should give so that it hurts. If you're not giving so that it hurts, then you're not giving enough. I'll tell you a story. When I just finished varsity, I was working, my first and second year of working, I was tithing. I think I was tithing after tax. And I just sensed that God said to me, I want you to increase your tithe by this much. So I was paying more than my 10%. The next month I got a raise, so that the raise equaled the new amount. So the amount that I was now paying was the 10% of the new amount of my salary. I mean, that's incredible. And that's the thing that happens to you, you get goosebumps. There's a very good book on money, which has got nothing to do with money. It's called God's Smuggler. It's about a guy smuggling Bibles into Russia under communism. It's an amazing book. It's a true story, but the guy shares about his experiences with money. And he calls our relationship with money and God the game of the royal way, because God is sovereign and He can bless, and He does bless His people. But He says we have to learn to trust Him. He tells a story that he was short for money for his tuition, and he was walking in the snow. It was in the UK, and he saw a £5 note or whatever it was. It was a lot of money in those days. That was what he needed. And as he found it, a beggar came up to him, and he just sensed God say, "Give that £5 note to the beggar." But he knew that he had to pay today, and that was the exact money that he needed. But he just sensed strongly, give the money away. So he gave the money away. He walked back to his res, and an anonymous donor had donated him $10. So he had money to pay, and he had extra money. So God blesses us when we trust Him. And it's all about trust. God doesn't worry too much about money. He's more concerned about trust. Another story from that same book, and this one blows my mind. I don't know if I could have done it. He had this little beetle. You know, the good old beetle. I had one when I was a student. Chuck, 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 chuck. He must have done, I don't know, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 kilometers of this beetle. And he's driving through Germany. And he's from Holland, and he's going to Russia and all over the place. And he's driving through Germany. He's in the middle of Germany, and the car breaks down. Engine kaput. So he goes to the guys. They say, sorry, we have to replace your engine. Now, he had no money. How much? 70,000 francs, or whatever they were, marks. 70,000 marks. He just sensed that he was in the right place. He was in Germany, where the car came from, and he should say yes. So he said yes. He's sitting there. They said it'll take 3 or 4 hours. So he's sitting there in the waiting room of this workshop with not a cent to his name, and he has to pay a 70,000 rand bill for a new engine, 70,000 mark, whatever it was. While he was sitting there, an old lady walks through the door, sees him, comes across and gives him an envelope with 70,000 marks. She turns around and walks out. I mean, yes, you read stories like that, it just blows your mind. But I know it's true, because I've had experiences like that. I've had friends talking similar stories. His last story in his book, which I think is an important one, is that God doesn't want us to scratch and scrape in our lives. We are King's kids. We are members of royalty, and He wants to bless us. He was trying to scrimp and save, and because he was a missionary and he didn't have a lot of money, he was donations. And God said to him, "What you're doing is wrong. You must live an abundant life. And if you trust me, I will bless you." The pastor from Glenridge Church on top of the railway station told a story. He wanted to learn about the word generous and lavish. So one day, he saved up a lot of money, and he said to his daughter, "I'm taking you to Gateway. I want to lavish on you." And he said to her, "Anything that you want. Anything. You ask for it, I'll buy it." That day, he bought her a dress, he bought her ice cream, he bought her this, he bought her that. Anything that she wanted, he bought. He said he learned a lot about the generosity and the lavishness of God. Something to think about. I'd like to share a few more stories. It seems that God, if we sow into a certain area, God will bless us in a certain area. It seems that way, but we must be very careful of twisting God. There are churches out there which would say, okay, well, if you give $5, God's going to give you a TV. You know, if you give $10, God's going to give you a car. If you give $50, you're going to get a house. And that, do you see that that's warped thinking? You're giving to get. It's a selfish giving. You're giving to get something. It's warped, it's twisted. God doesn't want that sort of thinking. We must give for giving's sake. We must see a need and sow into that need. And we mustn't think, oh, I'm doing this because God's going to bless me later. I'll tell you an example. A pastor, I heard it on the radio. He had this beautiful Bible with gold-edged pages and everything, and I think he was given it as a gift from his mother or whoever, and he loved this Bible. And he went somewhere, and this other guy that was sitting with him, obviously a poor guy, he looked at this Bible and he said, "Gee, that's a beautiful Bible." And he just sensed God say, "Give the Bible to this guy." And he didn't want to because it was his favorite Bible. He just loved it. But he did. He gave it to the guy. A couple of months later, he gets a phone call from the harbour. So out of the blue, the guy says, "Excuse me, are you a pastor?" "Yes, I'm a pastor." He says, "Well, we've got a container with 2 tons of Bibles. Do you want them?" You see how you sow in an area and God blesses you in an area. Same area. I was sharing at my home group last night that the ministry that I'm doing in my church is we're going to the local community where there is a school that's quite disadvantaged. They're really struggling, and we're putting the grade 10, 11, 12 kids out, and we're giving them extra maths and extra English lessons. And you know, it's time and effort and sacrifice, but I didn't do it to get anything. I just think it's a good thing to give education because this country needs it. And since I've started that, a lot more work has come in my business. There are schools for rural areas. Now, is there a link there? Is it just coincidence? I don't know. But God works like that. I'll tell you another story. I had a draftsman come work for me. Young guy, very talented guy. And when things got bad, we loaned him to another architectural practice. I didn't want to lose him because he was a talented guy, but we gave him to another practice that needed a draftsman. When things improved and we needed him back, I went to him and I saw what he was doing, and I saw that he was happy where he was and that he was enjoying the software that he had great powerful software that he was making 3D images with and stuff. And so for his sake, I left him there. I could have taken him back because that was the deal that I had with the architect that was employing him. And you know what happened after that? The architect and him went into a business partnership developing. And the amount of work that those 2 guys gave me was massive. I must have made a couple of million rand out of those guys. But that probably would not have happened if I hadn't have let him stay there. So small acts of kindness, small acts of generosity, God will bless you back. I think of another story. A friend of mine, he had just become a Christian, and his job was sailing boats. So he got a charter to sail a yacht from Durban to the United States. He gets there. He's been paid a deposit, which he used to go over there. He gets there, and the guy says, "Sorry, I'm not paying you." So he said, "Well, I'll take your boat out in the harbour and sink it." The guy says, "Fine, I've got insurance." The guy says, "Look, tell you what, there's food on the boat, you can stay there as long as you like, but I'm sorry, I don't have the money to pay you for what you just did." So these guys are stuck in America. They wanted an air ticket back to South Africa. So they go to church that Sunday. They find a church somewhere in New York where they were. He had 25 rand in his pocket. When the bowl came past for collection, he put half of it into the collection bowl. It went around. As it came back the other way, he took the other half. He said, "God, this is all you now." He put all the money, every cent that he had, into the collection bowl. On his way back to the yacht from church, a lady called him over and said, "Look, I need help. I need to move this yacht from this side of the harbour. Can you do it for me? I'll pay you." Within 2 weeks, he had earned enough money to buy his air ticket back home. It's all about trusting God. Trust and obey. If you hear God saying to you something, if you see the nudge, the little push, obey it. Give. It will hurt you, but give, and He will bless you. Okay, I think that's it. It's a shorter talk today. Any questions? God says, "Test me. Test me, and I will show you." It doesn't mean that you'll always be wealthy. I mean, I'm struggling. I still didn't get a salary last month. I got my university salary. I'm tithing with money that I get, and you will still go through tough times because I think your character is more important than your happiness. But in the end, God will bless you, and you will prosper. Okay, this is the last talk, guys. That's it. You can find my talks on YouTube. Bill's Talk 105, 205, 305. This will be 505, the last one. Thanks a lot.